Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and it's happened, guys. We now have the announcement to the announcement.
Uh-oh.
I know. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise. They do this every single time. They announce when the announcement is, and recently this week they announced that there will be an announcement at BlizzCon. Like, wow,
No,
surprising,
really? They're gonna announce
surprising.
something at BlizzCon?
So we should expect the next expansion during that time.
The
I
announcement
think.
of the next expansion during that time.
Yeah. Sorry. The announcement for the next expansion during that time, and I think we all sort of expected that, like the timeline just fits. So let the rumors begin. Let the
New
sort of
mechanic. New mechanic. New
yeah.
mechanic, please?
They have to have a new mechanic because for the past two expansions, it's really just been about transitioning to standard first of all, and then the adventure, I guess, which doesn't. I don't know. I don't know what the adventure really did, but
The adventure totally changed the meta. Are you kidding me? The adventure
well,
did so much.
I mean, in terms of constructed, I'm not really sure what it did,
I don't know
but
if it did anything for constructed. But for the
right.
arena, it was huge. And then there was that arena patch, and then there was that other patch. Stuff has been happening, man.
Stuff has been happening. Anyways, what I'm saying is we probably have a good like month and a half of this meta left. I think that would be
Um,
correct.
yeah, so last time, if you remember LOE, they did the announcement, which no one was surprised about during BlizzCon, and then they
Oh,
released the game like 2 days later.
right. It was just a week later. They're
Yeah.
like, when we're releasing it Thursday,
Okay, if
and it
they do
was
that again, none of the tier scores are going to be ready. Just FYI.
yeah,
If they give us 2 days to do, because this is going to be a large expansion. This is not like the adventure where they release like 6 cards per week, and we're like, okay, we can keep up. This is going to be a I don't know what is like usually like 130 cards. Like OG was like
yeah.
100 cards because the old got like the Cthulhu cards weren't in the arena. But normally, it's going to be like 130 cards, and that's going to be way too much. So I hope they don't release it all like at once, right after BlizzCon, the way they did LOE. But you never know with Blizzard, right? Especially this Hearthstone team that's really been kind of fast as far as Blizzard goes with releasing new content.
Right.
Um,
Well, that's
Slow
out of
to patch
necessity.
things, but fast with the new content. Like their new content, they said it right. Their new content is made more than 6 months ahead of time, and like basically like already from a design perspective, just like getting the like release stuff in order. So they already know when they want the release date to be, and you never know, right? It could be that like second week of November again, and we could all be scrambling. But I'm with you. I think it's not going to be until after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, yeah.
I've heard some people say or guess that it's going to be like not until next year, but that's definitely not that will not happen
No.
because of how the business works. You need something before Christmas. You definitely need something before Christmas.
Yeah, you need to build up the hype and you need to push product during the holiday season um, when people have money, right? Like people are going to get gift cards and presents and just cash to spend, and they're gonna want to spend it on the for packs of new cards. So, yeah. I can't see a world in which that's possible,
Yep.
but
So it's going to happen in, like you said, right, a month and a half. I'd say that's a good guess.
I think that's good. So, yeah. Until then, we're still stuck with this meta. Maybe stuck
What
is
do
a
you mean
bad word.
stuck? I like this meta. Okay, so I'll be upfront with it. I'm not doing as well in this meta as I was doing in OG, and I was doing even better in League of Explorers than OG, even though both were really high. Here, I think I'm like a normal Infinite player these days. Like my record has been a little shaky to my usual standards, but I'm really enjoying myself. And when I say like this is like the Karazhan, like after the patch and everything. Um, I've really been enjoying myself because I'm playing all these different kind of classes, right? I always play all the classes evenly, and it's it's fun. Like, you get to play with all these classes, and you always get a deck. Like, even decks that I drafted, I'm like, this is a bad deck, and that's been happening a lot. Where after the draft, I'm like, well, we're not going to get more than like 7 wins. Let's just try to get to 7. Hopefully, if we don't get to 5, it's a little disappointing, but it's still kind of understandable. But even those decks, they're very like flavorful to the classes. It's not like it was before, right? Where you would draft this warrior deck and you would have like no weapons, no warrior cards, and just be like, well, I have a neutral class with no hero power. Let's go.
Yeah, you definitely get more of the good class cards, right? The class cards that make you sort of that define the class, which is really good. So yeah, in that aspect, it's fun. For me, I don't want to sort of, let's see, compare it to all the other metas. I always just get a little bit bored in, around this time, right? Where I know the next expansion is on the horizon, and I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I've been playing the same thing for a while, and it's been, I don't know, like a year since we've sort of established this stream schedule. So I've been playing, like, I always play more than you, right?
Yep.
So I tend to, I guess, get tired of it a little bit sooner. And I've also been playing off stream a lot because
You have been playing off stream a lot.
Yeah, you see that.
I see it. I'm surprised because you have such like a stream schedule that you're playing Hearthstone too.
It's surprising, but I actually enjoy playing Hearthstone.
Oh my god!
Crazy, right?
Oh my god! Yeah. See, and you're saying it's a stale meta. It's not a stale meta.
It's like I've seen it already, and I feel as if I've
seen it for a month.
Figured it out.
Okay, see, that's the thing. You figured it out. I don't think I'm at your level of having figured it out yet, because it's literally been here for like less than 4 weeks since that patch that changed everything, or a lot of things, not everything. And that patch came like a week and a half after the final release of Karazhan with the Karazhan like bonus. So like this meta is pretty fresh. It's been with us for like a month. It's only getting to the point where I think you're supposed to like get a good handle on it. Like if someone 2 weeks ago told me I have a good handle on this meta, like a very good handle on this meta, I'd be like, oh, you may know a lot about this meta, but there's no way you're like through with it. Now it's a little more believable, but like a meta generally lasts. Like if you talk about the OG meta, right? How long did that last for? 4 months. How long did the LOE meta last for? Like 5 or something. Like I don't know. Like I may be exaggerating a little, but the LOE meta lasted for more than 4 months. The OG meta lasted for May, June, July. Okay, like 3.5 months. But still, right? Like that's a serious amount of time. This particular Karazhan post-patch meta has lasted for a month. So I think we have a while to go. I think, and this is the best time to practice, right? I think that's what we're trying to get at. Because the meta has stabilized, it's not going to change from now until the month and a half until the next expansion release. You can really take this time to improve without and like learn a meta without like really fearing that it'll change on you, like either the next week or like in 2 weeks when a new expansion comes out.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of, I guess, like my feelings is just sort of the last 2 expansions haven't added anything significant, right? Which is why we're desperately asking for a new mechanic. Just like when Inspire first came out, that was really cool. It was something that wasn't in the game before. Introducing old gods does nothing for the arena almost. Like we don't have Cthulhu cards, first of all, and you're almost never drafting Yogg-Saron. N'Zoth, you're drafting a little bit more often, but not that much.
You didn't think the Bog Creeper meta was hugely game changing?
I mean, it was game changing, but not because of the mechanics.
It's true.
Like
it's true.
It's like, oh, it's the taunt meta.
It was the taunt meta. It was a totally different meta. So I get what you mean. I'm not sitting here like giddy with excitement about how to figure out the next thing. It's more like we're just reapplying things we already knew in a different configuration. Which is what Blizzard's also doing, which is a little lazy of them, but hopefully with 2 what I call lazy patches in a row out, they're going to have an exciting new one where something big is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that. But anyways, it is nice to know that there will be a next expansion. I don't think there was ever any doubt, but we have the announcement to the announcement, and it's a nice benchmark. We know that it's coming up. We know that some information is going to be provided to us at BlizzCon. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yep, definitely. This is probably I was really excited for Karazhan until I heard the name and the theme, and then I realized it was just going to be mages all the time, and I got a lot less excited for it. And I think overall, if you want to review Karazhan, it did a lot. It did a lot more for the arena than I thought it would. Some cards, I think, when you first look at it, it didn't seem to be so great, but the impact was felt swiftly, immediately, and I'm talking about specifically Spirit Claws. I think we rated it very high, but somehow there was a disconnect between rating this card very high and then thinking, like, this will totally change the meta. I don't know why. I think the Karazhan bonus had something to do with it, where we weren't expecting such a big Karazhan bonus for the offering rates.
I mean, everything just came together for the Shaman so well. The fact that they got Spear Claws, which is Light's Justice with huge upside, right?
Yeah.
And Light's Justice is already a great card.
I love that when we started the Karazhan meta, the first thing we did was like raise Light's Justice by like 20 points and lower the Yeti and be like, okay, with what's about to happen, you need Light's Justice. This is going to be the best thing ever. And then they're releasing a card for the Shaman that's like, this is Light's Justice, but way better.
And we've seen Arcane Explosion just become better and better with every single expansion. And it's not just because Arcane Explosion has gotten better. Everyone probably just underrated it for the longest time, right? So with something like Arcane Explosion, and then people using it in the form of a Twilight Flame card, they're like, oh wow, this is really good. Yeah. And then Shaman's just got a better version of it, right? Just pure power creep.
Imagine back in Classic, when you were trying to make a tier list and someone said to you, okay, Fan of Knives is going to be higher than SI7 Agent.
Yeah.
You would have said that is ridiculously stupid because SI7 Agent is like the best card ever. Right. And Fan of Knives is like a good card, but just I wouldn't take it over a Yeti. And now Fan of Knives is one of the best cards. And it's partly because of all the random little things like token generation or 2-drops that have 1 health. They're like a real thing now. And
the fact that you can just get that and draw a card.
Yeah, right.
You're not missing the card.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I mean that phrase in general, where it's like, oh, I would never take it over a Yeti. I mean, you said that about everything.
Yeah.
Just because Yeti was the best card.
Fine. I'm still using Yeti as a benchmark. We should find a new benchmark. No, we shouldn't
anymore because it's actually just an average card now. What it has is the remnants of its previous reputation, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
But it's just a normal card. I guess there's no point in the. It's still a benchmark, right? You still have a Yeti. You have a mechanical Yeti. It sets the pace. I feel weird saying oh, I take it over a Raptor because that just means nothing, or it should mean nothing.
Right. And you want to use a vanilla minion. You don't want to use oh, it's better than a validated Doomsayer.
People are like, what? Yeah, because imagine if you set the new standard. What's the new standard right now? I'm looking at roughly where the Yeti used to be would be something like a Bog Creeper, or a Evil Heckler. Something like that. That's a weird thing to set as a standard.
Yeah, it's strange. Anyways, so that's kind of where we're at. And I guess as per the middle of the meta, we are gonna talk to you guys today about a more general topic because I guess we have nothing to say about the meta. Is that true?
Well, we said so much last week. We had an hour and a half about every single class going down the road. Yeah.
So, anyways, let's transition to the topic that I really want to talk about this week, which is sort of how to improve.
Yes, and this is very important. I'm going to stress again how important this is, not because you probably want to improve, but because this is the time to do it. Right here, with Merp saying how the meta is stale, and me saying, well, it's settled. I don't think it's stale, but it's settled. But still, the whole idea is, it's the same. You come in today, you play an arena. You come in a week from now, you play an arena. It's going to be the same thing. You are not going to get a different experience, which means it is the best time to consciously make comparisons and evaluate your play and improve.
Right. So we've established that now is a great time to improve, but at the same time, we are in an environment in which it is very hard to get high wins in the arena.
Yes.
Right. The average experience of the average arena player is very high now. There are a lot of cards, right? So
and we're also very far removed because this was an adventure.
Yes.
We're very far removed from the initial burst of people. Like, if a large expansion comes out, your arena win rate just like spikes right afterwards, always, right? Like, happens in OG, happened in TGT, happened
in GVG when they introduced cards in the arena first.
Yeah.
If that ever happens again,
oh my god,
arena,
those 3 days were just like 12 win heaven. Like, every other run was 12 win. You just watch any stream and it's just like, oh, there's a 12 win again. So when it comes to an adventure, that same like bounce happens, but it's evened out a bit through like the first 2 weeks, and then it dissipates by the time like everything's out. So we're so far away from that initial burst. That was like at the first week of August, right? We're in the middle of October now. So this is like, we say this a lot because it's true. It's like pollen in the air. I don't know if you guys know, but like every year the amount of pollen in the air gets like so much larger than the year before that. And it's been happening for like the last 20 years. And so that's why your allergies are getting worse. That's how the arena is, for completely different reasons, in a very bad analogy. Every single expansion that comes out, by the time it comes to the end of that expansion, it is now the hardest meta. It's always going to be like that, because there's always going to be more veterans playing than new blood coming in at this point in the game's life cycle.
Yeah. Anyways, let's not think about pollen. I'm actually allergic to pollen, so that's an analogy that is a little bit too close. Hits too close to home for me. Anyways, so let's get started. I get this question a lot when I stream. Someone comes in and just asks, sort of like, Merps, like, I really like playing the arena. I'm really interested in it. Like, I want to improve, and I know that I should just play more, but how do I become more active in the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can I improve from 3 wins to 4 wins, or from like 6 wins to infinite, or wherever you're at on the spectrum, right?
So there's 2 kinds of people, right? Like, some people just naturally do something and they're good at it, and other people improve on it. I guess there's a third kind of person who just keeps doing the same thing and like never ever improves. But that's kind of rare, and that's what we're trying to get out of. Like, we're trying to move you from less of that third type of person to the second kind of person, or more to the second kind of person from already that point. Like, we're not naturals at this. I didn't jump in the arena and start getting 7 wins. I got like 2-3 wins by first try back in the easy meta, the way easy meta, where everyone was new at the game.
Right. So if you were at ADWCTA skill level, and you were playing at that, like, if you just jump in as a newbie, you shouldn't you should not expect 3 wins.
You should expect like 1 win these days.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you would get 1 win.
And that's after you go like 0-2, and then someone,
right.
And you hope to face someone just as skilled / unskilled as you. Yeah. But so let's get started. I want to separate sort of my advice, first of all, based on where you're at on the spectrum, right? So I want to talk first about, if you are an actual new player, your number 1 priority is to learn all the cards. And this is going to take a while, right? But like, don't focus on sort of like too much on plays, counterplay. Like, your number 1 priority should just be to learn the cards, and there are a lot of them, especially learn key cards on key turns. So if you don't know all of them, like some examples, like True Silver Consecration for Paladins on turn 4, Flame Strike Fireline's Portal on turn 7. You just have to know these. So let's get that out of the way first. If you are listening to this and you are either a new player or someone who hasn't played a lot,
what are the key cards?
Do that first. Key cards, you want to focus especially on high impact cards that have an offering bonus, right? So for example, when I talked about the Mage on turn 7 using either Flame Strike or Fireland's Portal, should you be aware of Flame Strike? Yes, because it is a very powerful card, and sometimes mages give away their hand, for example, by pinging a creature down to 4 health and then sort of playing out the rest of their hand, right? But you want to make sure you you also acknowledge the offering bonus. If you have a choice of playing around Flamestrike or Firelands Portal, you play around Firelands Portal. Like,
Yep.
so personally, I rarely play around Flamestrike nowadays.
Yep.
I can't, right? So I try to make
Well,
sure.
the problem with playing around Flamestrike is that it counters directly to playing around Fireland portals. Like,
Right,
it's
right.
usually one or the other. Usually can't do both, which is why the mage is where it is right now. So you
Yeah.
pick to play around Fireland's portal.
So the first step is to just, I'm not saying you should go to like a website, look at all the cards, memorize all of them, and then keep on playing. But where you're at right now, just learn all the cards, learn all the high impact cards.
Common class cards.
Common class.
You never play around rare class cards. There's too many cards. They don't come up often enough. It's way advanced. And common class cards that are rated highly. So,
Yes.
like, go look at the tier list. Go look at what cards are rated. And we're talking, like, really highly. Like, if you have a card that's rated, like, 60, which is significantly above average, don't ever play around it. Like, I don't care what is in there. It's just not high enough that you'll be, unless it's a card with a class bonus, with a set bonus, right? But for normal cards, it's too low. You're going to see it, and you may even see it like a frequent amount of times, but there's only so much that you can play around. So the line is probably like somewhere in like the mid 60s. Like Hellfire, I'd play around Hellfire if I can. I wouldn't give it like too much respect. Flamestrike, I obviously would give it as much respect as I could, but before I lose the game, right? Like sometimes you're looking at your hand, you're bored, you're like, well, if I play around the Flamestrike, I lose anyway, so I can't play around the Flamestrike. But otherwise, it should be in your head, right? You should think about it. At Hellfire level, you sort of think about it, not really. Consecration, you have to think about, because that's high enough. So I'd say like mid 60s is the line for, you should like at least think about it.
Right. So let's, after getting that out of the way, and we're saying, okay, well, if you're a true beginner, that's priority number one. I think after that, we can give more generalized advice. So for those of you trying to go from 3 to 4, go from 6 to 7, etc., like wherever you're at, there are ways to actively improve and not just sort of like play a run, okay, play another run, and then maybe not absorb all you can absorb out of it, right? So the one thing I advocate highly is just active learning. And by active learning, I mean you should, if you are playing by yourself, talk through your plays, right? So if you're playing by yourself, you have to talk through your plays. But the difficult part of that is we're kind of stubborn creatures, right? And like it doesn't really feel natural as well. So a lot of times what you do is you'll get lazy about it, or the human brain sort of justifies things in different ways.
I'm playing a Harvest Golem now because it's the best card to play now.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's exactly
Yeah, like that's,
and it makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
That's why you're playing it.
It totally makes sense, right? So when I say this to someone, they're just like, oh, like talk through your your stuff. If you're by yourself, that's how you're gonna do it, right? No. And then when something happens, you're gonna justify it in a way that makes sense to you. So that is pretty bad from learning, right? So here's what you do. You have a couple of options. Number one, grab a friend. Like when ADWCTA and I played Hearthstone, we watched each other play Hearthstone more than we played Hearthstone individually, I think. Mostly because I was playing D3 at the time, so I mostly just watched him play Hearthstone.
I was about to say, I played more than I watched, but that's because I was actually playing Hearthstone.
But this also really challenges you to explain your plays, right? Because you explaining a play to yourself, you could just say it was the best play because of blah blah. Someone else with a different viewpoint can push back and saying like, well, did you consider this? I think that's higher percentage, or like based on his previous plays, I think you should have done that. Right. Number one, it's something you might not have thought about. Number two, it forces you to answer, right? You can't just, because with yourself, you could say it's like, oh, that was just wrong, right? And for a lot of us, when we justify things in life, saying that was just wrong, period, you feel pretty good about that. It's like, oh man, Like this is some pretty good analysis from the smartest guy in the world, aka myself, right?
No, so this is I see this so much in like Overwatch where you just blame your teammates all the time. Where you're just like, because Overwatch it's a 6v6 game, and if you are playing by yourself or with like a friend or two, you always have a bunch of random people. And you're just like, well, they did this, this, and this wrong, and so these bad things happen, and so we lost, right? Because it's not your responsibility. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not. In Hearthstone, people don't do that. They blame some form of either RNG or I could not, like the same idea, right? Like whatever it is, it's not my fault, right? Like it wasn't something I could have or should have done in order to prevent this outcome. And sometimes it's true, right? Like sometimes you don't play around that flame strike just because, otherwise you would have lost. But you need to be sure that that argument is on solid ground, especially when something bad happens, right? And then if the bad thing in the similar situation happens like a little too frequently, maybe like start reevaluating your play. Like something I notice a lot in Hearthstone is I have a certain thought process about what I can get, of what I can like play around and still win the game. And then I keep reviewing it and says like, okay, here I anti-tempo to play around a swipe. And then all of a sudden, I'm down 1 tempo on the board, and I lost the game. So, he didn't have a swipe, or he had a swipe, but regardless, he didn't have to have a swipe, and I lost the game. What's the chance of him actually having a swipe in his hand at that time? I know that. That's just like, you could do math on that, right? Of which turn they've drawn a swipe at that point, given that the average swipes in a deck at this win is probably this amount. And then you review, and you see, like, am I giving up too much here? Like, am I losing too much here just because I'm trying to play around a swipe? Like, that's the kind of thing that you get a feel for yourself, because everyone kind of plays at a different level of regression. Everyone drafts, like, decks a little differently. And so, at the end of the day, based on your deck and your playstyle, you have, like, different lines that you have to figure out where they are about when to play around things and when not to play around things.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, you want to have someone to challenge your plays, to challenge your way of thinking. So, let's talk about how easy that is, right? Like, that's not that easy to find, because number one, you have to have a friend who plays Hearthstone. Number two, you have to find someone that is willing to actually challenge you. It's like, dude, I just came over to, like, have fun.
Yeah, people who have fun are the worst. They're not helpful.
Yeah, so you basically need someone who is going to be as stubborn and as committed to improvement as you are. Some of you are going to have friends who want that, some of you won't. So what do you do after that? Well, thankfully there are streams, right? There are lots of good arena players out there. You can watch our channel. There's like Hafu, Ratsuma, Shady, etc., etc., etc. So how do you utilize these streams to the maximum potential? This is sort of the a sub question to the general question, because I think streams are a huge part of it. When you watch streams, you need to be actively watching them, right? So what you want to do, first of all, going into streams, you have to have the mindset, and I'm trying to say this without sounding like really pretentious, but if you are trying to improve, even if you're going from 6 to 7 wins, if you're trying to learn from someone, and they're streaming and they're pretty good, you have to have the mindset that their move is correct, with the exception of like blatant misplays.
Like, if the entire chat is with the thing that you're thinking of, like, that's when you may without
that, it should be a mathematical thing, like, because sometimes even if chat says like, oh, this decision was terrible, like,
well, yeah, sometimes what I'm saying is that's a precondition. If you think that the streamer is doing something wrong and like chat is not like at least 50% with you, then you're like, yeah, you could be the brilliant person that is, thinking of the brilliant play that the streamer is like explicitly denying and that chat doesn't get. But at that point, you're probably like a 7-8 win arena player. Like, if you have the confidence that you're like a infinite plus player, then go ahead. You have ideas that are probably like better than ours, definitely better than Twitch chats. But if you're in like, I'm trying to improve from 5 to 6 wins, just like, I'm not saying we're perfect, we're not, but the chances of you being right and us being wrong is way lower than the chances of you thinking you're right, but
So
us actually being right. So,
right.
like, that's, like, it's not that we're infallible, it's that for purposes of learning, it's just a good assumption.
So here's the way that that a lot of people come in with, like, they some people just want to watch streams for entertainment, and I think that's great. It's a source of entertainment, and I watch streams for entertainment all the time. Some people come in wanting to learn, but with them, they're a lot of times they're playing the gotcha game, right? And it becomes a game with Twitch chat as well, in which you want to like point out the misplays, you want to go with the memes, and that's fine too. But that's not the mindset that you want to go in with if you actually want to improve. If you actually want to improve, you want to deeply concentrate and sort of get into the mind of the person who's streaming and really see what their thought process is.
Yeah.
And even though my thought process is going to be different from like Ratsman's thought process, Hafu's thought process, like you want to understand like exactly why we do these things. And at its core, because we average very high wins, just be like, okay, most of the time it is going to be good.
Like, if you do exactly what we do, you will average really high wins too. That's how this game works. There's no
right.
mechanical ability in Hearthstone.
Once you get to like that 7-win, average, that plateau, then you can be like, well, okay, no, this is mostly just sort of a kind of a flavor decision, like between Ratsma
and sometimes we'll
and
say it, and
right?
like this is why like there are a lot of good questions coming from Twitch chat all the time. That's like, why did you do this? Or like, you clearly did not play around this card, right? Like, we would do something and we either could have played around the card and then had some kind of cost, and then we didn't. And then, people like kind of like, well, why didn't you do that? Like, that's a good thing. That triggers the streamer to like explain stuff, right? Like, it's good to question the streamer. And sometimes we're wrong. Like, there's many times where I'll be like, oh yeah, no, that was better. I didn't see that because I'm one person, doing this, and it doesn't always work. But sometimes I have like an actual reason for why I didn't do it, and I just like didn't say it out loud because I don't know, I'm tired, I missed it, I thought it was obvious or whatever. And it's really good to point out. And we try to like look at chat all the time and be able to like respond in like within one play of like what happened. So that's all really good.
Right. So that's something I want to establish. You want to go in with an open mind, right? Now, let's focus on exactly what you should be doing at every step of the arena run in order to sort of more actively involve yourself. So we can start at first with the draft. When the cards come up, some people draft faster, some people draft slower. I'm probably one of the slower drafters. Shady is probably the slowest.
Okay, fine.
Drafter.
Shady's the slowest.
And then Ratsman and Hafu are pretty fast. But what you can do is, you can also go into VODs and pause. So these aren't really considerations. But what you want to do is, before every pick, you want to just sort of stop and pause, evaluate the deck, look at the curve, you want to be able to judge the sort of value of these cards at that time, and then you want to make your decision, but before the streamer makes their decision. I mean,
and listen to the streamer.
Yeah, like, listen.
The streamer will say things sometimes like, this is good too, but I'm gonna go with this. In which case, don't beat yourself up for it if you pick the other card. That means like quite like literally like, they had to make a choice, and it didn't really matter which two. Like, if you didn't think they were close, you may want to, like, figure out why the streamer thought they were close. But, like, that aside, if you just wanted to go with one over the other, and it's the other one that the streamer picks, don't, like, be like, oh, so I'm wrong here. Why do I need to take the other card? That quite literally means you weren't wrong. They just decided, it was like a coin flip. They just went with the other way.
Right. So that's fine. And if you're watching live, feel free to ask questions, right? Like, I don't know of any single streamer that will refuse to answer questions based on strategy, based on gameplays. Now, the question might
unless you are recording a podcast and then you answer no questions for an hour, and Twitch chat gets angry at you.
Yeah, that's when they riot, I guess. But so this is sort of what you should do, right? And you won't always get explanations because chat moves too fast, the streamer doesn't see your question, you just don't understand something, that's fine. You still want to be actively engaged in the process, and whenever there is a difference, you want to think about why potentially there is a difference. Sometimes it'll be explained to you, sometimes not. But after the draft, you if you have time, you want to look back and think like, well, what were some picks that would have differed? And the first difference is always the most important one, because after that, it's sort of like the butterfly effect, right? You're not really sure what happens because if you differ from that. But the first difference is something in which you can go back and be like, well, okay, like what was really the difference here, and then maybe you can learn something from that. I would not put a lot of time into analyzing like, well, the fifth difference was like, this bookworm that they took and I didn't take, but at that time there were 5 dragons, and then you're just opening up a Pandora's box. So don't do that. So any analysis that you want to make, isolate it to the first pick, and that's it. Or the first difference, sorry. ADWCTA, do you have any more tips on the draft itself?
No, I would say, like, the thing with the draft is to not beat yourself up too much for the draft, because at the end of the day, you kind of just need a vaguely workable deck to, like, average 7 wins. Like,
yeah,
you don't need the great deck, and depending on different draft styles, it'll get you kind of like a very different deck. But you can give me all of, like, I don't know, any Infinite Arena players' decks, and I'll do just fine with them. You can give them all my decks, they'll do just fine with it. Like, the gameplay is the core part. The deck kind of works with your gameplay to put you in a better place, but it's not, like, the actual drafting skill part of the draft is not making a huge difference. Now, whether you're offered good or bad cards, whether you're offered enough 2-drops, that makes a pretty big difference, but you're not really controlling that, right? Like, no. That's kind of Blizzard deciding how well your run is going to do. Like, your active input in the draft is, we've always said it's much smaller than your active gameplay. So definitely it's important, and it's one of the easier things to like learn mechanically. You eventually figure out like, oh, this deck needs more this drops, or oh, this deck doesn't have enough initiative, or this deck needs to go faster or loses, so we're just not taking big cards or whatever, right? You eventually learn those principles. But then when you get into a game, it's like many more moving pieces, and it's like harder to explain, and it's harder to like learn the general principles that hold all the glue together. But that's the gameplay skill that's doing it for the most part. So I would take like a more holistic approach to learning from the draft, where if you're like 1 to 2 cards different than the streamer at certain points, and you would have gone back, like if they took a 4-drop and you would have taken the higher value card because you don't care about 4-drops, it's not the biggest deal, right? Like you would have taken it later on, and you can do the measurement, right? Like, I would have taken the value pick here and gained 10 value, and over here at the end I would have had to take the 4-drop because we didn't have enough, and I would have lost 6 value. So overall I gained a net 4 value. This was pretty good if I went with my decision. The streamer thought the percentages were the other way, but at least in this instance it worked out. And you do this enough times and you start getting a good feel for the percentages yourself.
Right.
So it's
where we previously stated that just assume the streamer is correct. For the draft, it's the least sort of concrete of these, right? But at the same time, if you're at 3 wins, just assume that the streamer is correct.
And it's also like, see what the streamer cares the most about. Sometimes the streamer will be like, no, we're definitely not taking that card. And this is the part, even if you wouldn't have taken that card, maybe your reaction wasn't as strong, right? Maybe it was a Force Tank Max versus like your 5th 3-drop, and it's like pick number 26, and you're like, I'll take a Force Tank Max, and the streamer's like, no, we're not taking that Force Tank Max. You should think, whoa. My feelings on the Force Tank Max was like slightly positive or slightly negative or whatever, right? But the streamer obviously has such like a big reaction to this. Why? Like, that's probably a deck thing. That's probably like, at this point, the streamer has identified the deck's win conditions, and this card is just not fitting into it at all, and so this card would not help at all. And those are almost as important as the first difference of pick that you and the streamer make.
Right. If you're picking a card in which it's like 60-40 and the streamer goes for the 60 card and you go for a 40 card, that's not a huge difference. But right. If someone just says like, "Oh, there's no way we're picking this card," and you're like, "Oh, that's pretty good," like you need to identify
Yeah.
what's going on with that one. Not only because of the gap there, but it is much more likely that that is just the overall wrong card, right? That like out of everyone that you poll who averages like 7 wins or above,
Yeah.
maybe 1% or maybe less than 1% of them will pick that card. So you're like, okay, well, that is something which like I guess is almost a like an obviously wrong play.
Right.
And if I am even considering that, that means I'm doing something that's obviously wrong. So let's get that out of the way.
Yep.
Anyways, I think that's enough to talk about with the draft. Now let's get into the games, right? And when we talk about these games, so first of all, when they queue up for a game, you want to actually, sorry, before they queue up for a game, you want to do a thorough deck analysis here, which is something that I see a lot of people not doing. And especially when I coach, like I think I catch people off guard and it's like, all right, let's talk about the deck, sort of like give me a deck analysis, right? And some people don't even know how to go about this. And I think it's partly because a lot of people don't see streamers do it because streamers just do it like like they do it during the draft. And once they see a deck, they're like, got it. Like I understand this deck. So what you want to do is identify strengths and weaknesses within your curve, strengths and weaknesses within sort of card categories, right? Like, do I have reach? That's always something that's important. Do I have enough solid like minions on turn 2, 3, and 4, right? You don't want to just look at the the little graph given on the bottom and say like, oh, I have so many 3-drops, but like you have 3 deadly shots and an infest there as a hunter, right?
All infest deck.
Exactly, all infest, all unleash as well. Unleash is not something that can usually be played on turn 3. So you want to look at those, and then you want to look at, most importantly, what is your win condition, right? Some cards by themselves are win conditions, either in a big way, for example, like Ragnaros, or in a smaller way, like Cavaldier Raider, right? You want to identify win conditions, and then you want to identify your big sort of play style.
And the thing to know is that, like, with win conditions, because I don't know where, there's like a list of like win condition arena cards, but win conditions are basically anything that's an engine, anything that keeps like doing something over and over again, or anything that's dramatically tilted on one side of one type of value. So like sprint is a win condition. Why? Because all of a sudden you have all these cards. So if you were playing a card advantage game and your opponent wanted to play a card advantage game with you, you can go from losing to dominating them. Like Fel Reaver is a win condition. Why? Because all of a sudden you have 3 extra mana's worth of stuff on the board, right? And if that's a win condition, then your Fire Land Portals, which gives you like 1.5 to 2 mana's worth of things while being everything else, and having no real downside, definitely a kind of like multi-win condition thing. But even something pretty innocuous, like these cards aren't like, I've just named a whole bunch of good cards, right? But there are cards that are really not rated so good, or like they may have not been rated. So we've been trying to move these cards higher and higher, but like Blessing of Wisdom, for example, is a total win condition card. It's a 56 on the tier list. It's not that good, but it's a win condition card because you can get infinite amount of cards if whatever minion you put it on repeatedly is able to attack into your opponent's face and not get removed because you're holding the board, right? Like Manitai Totem does the same thing. So like that's the kind of stuff that that can win you the game by itself, right?
Yep.
And so like keep an eye out for those. They're not always the highest rated cards. Like high rated cards may not be win condition. They may just be really like a swipe is not really a win condition. It's just like a really good card.
Right.
On the other hand, a Savage Combatant, that could be a win condition. You could remove like 4 things with it.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's important. Identifying your win condition and also identifying your game plan, right? You don't want to just say Savage Combatant is a win condition.
I will wait to draw it and win game.
Right, like Nourish is a win condition. No, you want to identify sort of like, okay, well, am I going to be the aggressor in most of these games? Am I going to have to give up value pretty quickly to go for face damage? Or should my priority just be to preserve my health as much as possible in the early turns so I can put down all of these Cyclotrons and Bog Creepers and play my Flame Strikes, right?
So, like, one of the things, like, think about Savage Combatant, right? If you have a turn earlier on and you have a Savage Combatant in your hand already, and you can't play it because it's, like, not played until turn 6 at earliest, and you have a choice between, like, slowing down by, like, half a tempo and using your hero power to get some extra value and take a little bit of face damage versus just, like, putting down a 2-3 that maybe will trade with it and seems kind of like a waste, put down the 2-3. You need your health and you need tempo to maximize the effect of your Savage Combatant that you already have in your hand. It's like it's stuff like that that the streamer may or may not be saying it, but like at the time that decision is made, if you're like, why did you do that? The streamer will say something vague like, oh, I think we wanted the tempo. And you may try to like make the connection. Well, why do you need the tempo? Oh, maybe there's a win condition there. Streamers usually like good players usually make decisions to maximize their win conditions. So always look for the win conditions. And some of them are like the big general deck ones are pretty obvious, I think. Like if this is a big deck that's going to win by having more stuff than the others, and you see, ways that you're trying to play to preserve face. Well, it's because you want to survive long enough to use your cards. This shouldn't be that hard. If you're seeing someone just throw cards out the window for like the smallest advantage on the board, they have an aggressive deck that needs to push some face damage. Well, that's why. It's not like rocket science there. But sometimes like little minor moves are made many turns earlier in view of a win condition that's going to happen later.
So so make sure that you do your deck analysis. Actually spend some time, look at your deck, vocalize it, right? At every single point, you should be vocalizing these things, because once again, the human mind does like it. You trick yourself a lot, right? So when you think, you're like, oh, it looks good, it's aggressive, and then if you're forced to vocalize it, especially if you have someone next to you, then you realize the inconsistencies there, you realize the weaknesses there. So try to vocalize.
And never say like, because this is the right play or this is the better play. That's not an explanation. That's like, this is good because it's good. Like, say like, why am I playing let's say Scarlet Crusader here instead of the Razorfed Hunter? Say something like, well, Scarlet Crusader is the better card, and I want to make sure I get the board here. Like, I want to use that betterness. Like, we all know Scarlet Crusader is better than Razorfed Hunter. That's just like kind of a general thing that no one will argue with you about. But why play the better card first instead of the worst card if you have them both in your hand? Well, the reason is I really care about the board right now. Or the reason could be, like, I'm saving the beast for later because I have some beast synergies, Or the reason could be, my opponent has a 2-2 on the board. He can actually, like, kill off a part of the Razorfed Hunter, whereas a Scarlet Crusader will end up with a 3-1, and the, Razor Hunter will lose an attack and end up as a 2-1, right? Like, that's just not good. Like, have reasons for everything. Even if what you're saying is technically true, make sure that's the reason that you're playing the card.
Right. So... okay, we've established what you should do right before the first game, and you queue into your first game, or the streamer queues into the first game, and it's at this point where you apply the first part of what you did in the deck analysis, right, in the mulligan. The mulligan is an aspect of the game in which some streamers will go by very quickly because they sort of identify the win condition, they know all this stuff. This is a point in which, if you're watching a VOD, you want to pause because a lot of streamers go through it very quickly. But it's also the time in which you now can apply the first half of your deck analysis. Oh. So what I mean is, mulligan is super important, but a lot of people are very rigid with it, right? Like they say, like, oh, I keep my 2, maybe I keep my 3 if it's good, and that's about it, right? Obviously, I keep my 1s. What you'll see a lot of times is the mulligan will increase or decrease your win percentage by a lot. A ton, if you identified what you want to do with this deck, right? So, for example, speaking for myself, if I have a very control sort of deck, I might, and I'm a mage, right? And for example, if there's a Frostbolt in hand, as player 1, I typically don't keep removals because you're the aggressor, but I will keep the Frostbolt because I'll say, well, okay, I don't have that many 2s. Maybe I have like 4 or 5 2s, like just enough. I don't have any 1s, and I have like 3 Firelands portals. So what I want to do is just make sure things don't get out of hand, right? So maybe I'll keep the Frostbolt. If there's a Twilight Flamecaller, I'll be like, you know what, I'll keep that too. Maybe it's not like a solid turn 3 play, but it's something I'll need in order to reach my win condition. So I'll keep a Frostbolt and a Twilight Flamecaller as player 1. I won't always do this, but if I had the deck in which I'm like, well, I'm not drawing into that Zombie Chow anyways. I don't have like strong early game minions. I'm just gonna remove. I'm gonna keep this to help me survive until my portals. So that's something that is very deck dependent. And because you just did this deck analysis, you should be thinking of these things as well. And basically saying, all right, here's what I'm throwing away and here's what I'm keeping.
That sounds good. So do you have? Sorry, keep going.
No. What was your question?
I don't really have a question. I'm just saying we're running short on time, and I'm sure you have a lot to talk about.
No, it's actually not a lot, because once we get into the actual game, right? It really is just about, okay. We've already established that you need to make sure that you get your move in before the streamer does, right? Like, so before every single move, you want to think, here's what I would do, and here's what the streamer does eventually. Once again, we're saying just assume that they're correct. Yep. I just want to split two things when you're in game. When you're in game, number one, if it is just about trades on the board or just about like sort of which minion to play in terms of which is just better for this turn, you usually do understand that. You usually understand that, and this the streamer usually applies that. The one thing I think that separates sort of 5-6 win players from infinite and super infinite players is you want to make sure you have the reads that the streamer does as well. This is something that I see a lot of players don't prioritize, where they plan in terms of their, they're trying to actively learn, and they say, oh, okay, I'm going to play the Scarlet Crusader because of this, I'm going to do that because of that. And suddenly when it comes to the streamers turn 7, they're going to be like, I am 100% sure they don't have Flame Strike. And a lot of times people are just like, wait. Like, how did you get that? What you want to do before every single turn, because this is something that every single infinite player does, if you ask them. They've been accumulating reads throughout the game. Now, it's not something that they'll always tell you, because it's very hard to be like, all right, after turn 1, they'll be like, all right, they don't have this and they have that. After turn 2, it's like, they have this, they don't have that. You need to be doing the same things. And when you're doing the same things, you also want to be thinking, like, let's jive that with our win condition, right? Our win condition is to be aggressive. So sometimes you don't care about the Flame Strike, but you're like, well, I can actually afford to play around it. What did they do during these turn 4, 5, 6 plays that would make me change my mind? So even though the streamer might not tell you these things, this is something you should be thinking about as well. And then if you reach the same conclusion as a streamer, like quite often in terms of these big macro decisions, and these reads, then you're in a good spot. Like, what you're doing is pretty correct, and what you're doing is on the right track. But you have to do that first of all. So that's the big thing about playing. Like, this is something that you just have to do. Like, try to make these reads, because I know a lot of people try to do the micro decisions in terms of what minions to play and what trades to make, but they don't think of like those reads and sort of crossing off all these things turn to turn to turn to turn, and then feeling really confident when it's turn 7 and turn 8.
And you can make reads that the streamer doesn't have, because everyone's making reads, and maybe you're sitting there and you're like, okay, he doesn't have a 3-drop, and maybe the streamer's making it, maybe they're not, maybe they're just not commenting on it, right? And then you can see if your read is right? You're watching the game, you know what cards are like up there. If you see, look at where each card is being played from, and then at a certain point the opponent's gonna play all those cards. You're like, see, no 3-drop. And you can be like, pat yourself on the back, say like, look, I got a good read. It's practicing the same skill as if you were actually playing. And maybe you can do something with that read at some point, maybe not in this game, maybe in a different game and what happened, but always try to have a ton of reads, right? Like, always try to have a read on everything, like what mana slots their cards fit into, whether they have removal, whether they have particular bombs, like board clears or like things. Sometimes like a really useful read that's kind of difficult to make, but you get really good at this eventually, is do they have small cards or big cards? Like, it's as simple as that. Because if you just have a read, it's like, wow, they have a bunch of big cards in their hand. You're going to play this game a whole lot differently than, oh, they have a whole bunch of small cards in their hand.
Right.
So we'll have a whole Lightforge soon-ish, and sometime in the next month, before BlizzCon, about reads. But it's definitely something that you can practice without actually playing the game, and it's something that is really hard to get good at, but is really easy to start doing and seeing an impact. Because the basic reads, like, there are so many people that I've seen play that, like, don't consider the most basic reads, such as, well, on turn 3 he did something weird, so he doesn't have a 3-mana minion. So, and then, like, later in a turn, he's like, oh man, I'm afraid that they're going to use a hero power. It's like, wait, but they don't have a 3-mana minion. They can't use a hero power, right? So you shouldn't be afraid of the hero power. You should challenge them to have, like, top-decked in the last 2 turns a 3-mana playable card. Like, that's, like, a very simple read that will, like, change a lot of things up for you if you just start making it very reliably. Just always look at the opponent and say, like, why did you do that?
Right. So let's just summarize this, because and honestly, that's really what I have to say about the rest of the game, right? So time-wise, like, the rest of the game takes a long time.
And importance-wise to getting the win, it takes up a lot of the value.
Right. But the advice really is just simple advice that sticks throughout the rest of the game. So, like, what I want to say is, to summarize all of this stuff, make sure that you're very active in what you're trying to do. Don't go in immediately with a critical eye. And what I mean is that, like, just assume that the person you're watching is probably pretty good. And, like, if you do that, and you turn the criticism to yourself, you're probably going to get more out of it. And then after that, it's always just active learning and making sure you know the deck inside and out, and trying to, like, every single turn, you're building your case, right? You're sort of building your knowledge of what have I played, what can I rule out from my opponent. And when you get to turn 6 and turn 7, you have gained so much more knowledge about your opponent's deck, and they probably don't have the same information for you. You're just going to win out, right? Like, this is why if you're a good player, you want to play a lot of turns, you want to make a lot of decisions, you want to force your opponent to make mistakes, because in the long run, you're going to win. And this is really the difference between the, like, pseudo-infinite players and the actual infinite players. And this is sort of the thought process that you should take in order to get there, and how you should sort of take this active learning and just use all these great resources that are available to you. So that's basically it for, like, it. I guess you could boil it down to, like, kind of a few paragraphs, but I like talking.
Or a 1-hour discussion on this.
Or a 1-hour discussion.
Either or. I mean, we'll expand on the whole, like, reads thing, which is very important, and some of the gameplay things in later Lightforges, because we have this Lightforge cycle, right? Like, if you made it this far, you probably know this cycle, which is we get excited, and whenever new information for the next expansion comes out, then we analyze all the information, then the next expansion comes out, and we track the meta, and we eventually get to the place where we're like, well, the meta settled. Well, the meta settled. The last Lightforge was about where the meta is right now. We'll probably do an update here or there on it, but now we're going to go back into, like, fundamentals of Arena, how to get better in the Arena, how to, do different elements to it. And I do think that's the reads thing is a really good point. I think we could really delve into that, like, a lot deeper. But we've done, like, like what 2 drops represent. We've done so many, like, coined, like, topic things. And we're gonna do more of that until we get actual new information about the Arena. About the upcoming expansion. So there's that to look forward to for the next month. It's really, like, the more, like, helpful ones for, like, players who are, like, not infinite. Because this is, like, the learning part, right? Like, the other analysis part is useful to everybody who are veterans, especially because we do a lot of compare and contrast and what's good and what's bad. But this is how you improve. Okay, question from the GOAT. What is it?
Right. We have one of those. How are you feeling today?
So today I feel really good. I woke up at like 3 o'clock. I actually woke up at 11. at a.m. and then I thought, oh, I'll just go back to sleep and doze off for a little bit, and then I woke up and it was 3, and I felt great.
I feel good too.
Question from the GOAT, guys, brought to you by our patrons at patreon.com/grinninggoat.
Damn.
This is what happens when people are not asking us questions. We have these amazing questions like how are you feeling today? That's
I might have been slightly underprepared for this segment. If you guys couldn't
You know what? Twitch chat, now's your chance to ask us a question from the GOAT, and we'll pick it up in the next 5 minutes and go back to it. But first, we're going to talk about Card Good Bad Netherspite Historian, which we kind of talked about a little bit when it comes to the RNG talk, because we had like a whole talk about RNG. And how it's really big in Karazhan, and Netherspite Historian is a weird version of the RNG. Because, yeah, like, what dragon you end up discovering is part of the RNG, but it's discovery, so it's, like, kind of limited RNG. You kind of, like, hedge it a little, right? Like, it's random which card you get, but then you get to pick which one. So, it's, like, okay-ish RNG. The big RNG part of this card is the fact that you need dragons, you need to draft dragons, and then you need to get the dragons in your hand, and you have to, like, anti-tempo one turn before you can play those dragons. So, it's rated at 34, which is one of the lowest cards. It's like in that body of cards where like you really shouldn't be drafting it. But of course, being like such a high synergy card, it could potentially have a lot of value. Merps has already had a 12-win run with it. Did you have 2 12 wins with it, or just 1?
I don't think. No. So my Dragon Mage deck actually didn't have any of those.
Oh, okay. So
I just had 3 bookworms.
Okay, never mind. But yeah. And on the other hand, it's really hard. Like, the trick with this card is not when to play it, right? It's like really blindingly obvious usually when you play it, which is at the last possible minute before you really need to play your dragon, because its anti-tempo doesn't do anything. So that's when you play it. The tricky part about this card is when do you draft it? Because it can be like, this is a win condition, right? This is a win condition that's rated a 34. It is such a lowly rated win condition.
Right. So this is sort of the weaknesses of static tier lists, right? Where, yeah, like it's rated at 34, but let's just say you start off with like a Twilight Drake, and then you draft. By turn 7, you have 3 dragons, which is exceedingly rare. And then on your 8th pick, it's like, do you pick that Historian? Yeah, you pick that Historian because that is going to be really, really good. So obviously, it's not rated like a 34 at that point.
34 is the average. And on average, you get somewhere between half a dragon to 1 dragon. You get less than 1 dragon.
So Netherspite Historian is one of those interesting cards that its average value is very, very low, but the upside is huge, and you rarely have those cards in that range, right? Because usually cards that could win you the game have that taken into account in their tier score. The reason that Netherspite Historian is still so low is because the body is so small as well, right? Like, it doesn't do anything in terms of like if it doesn't draw a dragon, it is absolutely terrible. It is so bad that it is almost unplayable. But you can also grab a Deathwing from it, and I have absolutely won/lost games based on one or multiple Netherspite Historians. So times when you can draft it are definitely, if early on the draft you don't have a few like great choices, you can certainly take one and then prioritize dragons, which are pretty good in the arena. Or you can just draft them after you've already gotten a couple of dragons and try to snowball from there, right? Like, and these days it's totally possible. Like, you see bookworms quite often, so you see dragon within dragon synergy, and you see Netherspite Historian quite a lot as well.
Dragon synergy.
Yeah. I mean, it synergizes with other dragons. And with Netherspite Historian, if you play it, you get another dragon that can synergize with your bookworm, right? Like, so I have actually seen a lot of people go for it, and then it's kind of frustrating when you're at 8 wins or 9 wins and someone plays all these dragon synergies, these dragon decks, and you're just like, oh, that's like, I can't believe they managed to pull it off. But it makes sense, right? These high upside decks are obviously going to make find themselves in the higher wins.
But don't do it.
I mean, don't actively go.
Don't actively. I did it once. It was pick 1, and I was like, or like pick 2 or something. And I was like, Netherspite Historian, let's do it. We're a paladin.
You had better picks. You had to have had better.
We did not. Well, I mean, we had technically better picks, but it was like bad picks all around, right? Like,
okay.
It was one of those like I could have taken a Booty Bay Bodyguard. Yes, it's a lot better than a Netherspite Historian, but I wanted to have some fun.
Yeah. I'd go for the Historian.
Like, why not, right? Like,
yeah.
Okay, Booty Bay Bodyguard is going to be better 9 times out of 10. But still, right? Like, you go for the fun pick sometimes. And it didn't work out. We actually did not have a single dragon offered for the rest of the draft. Like, that happens. That, like, sometimes you're thinking, like, what? That doesn't happen that often. That happens shockingly frequently. Like, not most of the time, but enough to, like, really throw you off. And otherwise, you get, what, like, 1 dragon? Or you go down in value to get, like, 2 or 3 dragons, and now you're, like, you have a crappy value deck because you're passing up, like, totally okay cards like Saboteur or whatever to take your dragons. It's just... that's why the average is so low, right? The average is so low for a reason. This is, like, a card that you should... One, because if you have this deck with it, it may be fun, but it's not really helping you improve your play. Because you're trying to hit this weird combo that's like one of a kind in this game, and you're not going to hit it all that often. So the idea with Netherspite Historian is if you have a dragon deck already, like if you have a deck with 2-3 dragons, go ahead, take one. Like, it's going to be a pretty good card. If you have a deck with like 5 dragons, definitely take one. It's one of the best cards in the game.
Right.
Like.
The message I want to put out there, though, is just because you see Netherspite Historians go off, right, don't let that impact the actual probability, which is very low, of a Netherspite Historian or / Dragon deck working. Because obviously you're only going to see it when it works, right? A lot of times people either won't play it and it'll be stuck in their hand, and they'll still have it in their hand when you swing for lethal. Or what happens is those decks just fizzle out completely. So when you see like dragon decks at above like I'd say like 4 or 5, like probably 5 wins, those are the ones that have worked. Like don't confuse the small number that have worked and ignore the mass majority of Netherspite Historian decks that haven't worked. But be smart about it, and you could be one of those decks. You can improve the chances that you are one of those decks, but don't go for it. Because I do understand how tempting Netherspite Historian is.
I was tempted. It did not work.
But I have lost multiple times to that card just because it gets you insane value, and also you always have the chance of a death win, right? And they could always just death wing you on turn 10. So watch out for that card. Identify that it is one of the few weak cards, lower scored cards that can absolutely just win you the game.
Yeah. And it's not the only one, right? You have like Jeeves, which we rate like pretty low, but if you have a very small deck, like Jeeves is amazing. But you have to have like such an all-in deck for Jeeves to be like consistently like workable. Like there's cards like these, and they work in different ways in their win conditions, and they make the game fun. But like they're kind of like draft tricks, right? Where at some point you recognize that your deck is fitting with that, and then that gets offered, and you're like, yes, we take it now.
Sure.
Okay. Back to the question from the Go. This is a great one from Rafalface. How to not get anxious when playing the arena. I get so anxious to the level of not playing the deck I drafted for months. Feels bad, man.
You want to tackle this first?
Okay. So there are some games that I do get a lot of anxiety playing, like StarCraft. I always get so much anxiety playing.
My gosh. How do people play that game without popping 5 pills?
It was like when I was playing StarCraft, I was like, I had to get myself in the mood. I had to like be calm. I had to do my stretches, and then I had to click the find match button, and then I instantly tense up. And I'm like, oh god, okay. And then like I run a like 10-minute strategy down to like perfection or not perfection. I win or I lose, and I'm like, okay. So the game was 10 minutes, like because I have a very low APM. I can't do longer games than that. And it's so tense. And I do like 2, maybe 3, and I'm done. Like, I cannot play any more StarCraft. And so I understand that, but, like, Hearthstone shouldn't quite be like that. I think you may be, like, because that's why I get anxious when I am very hard on myself on every single play. and I know if I do something wrong. Like in StarCraft, it's really easy to know you did something wrong because the reaction is instant. Like I have like build a I don't know like a barracks at this time, and if I miss it, I'm like, oh crap, I'm slow. I did something wrong. It's like very instant, right? Or like by this time I should have these following troops, and if I don't, then I'm slow because I did something wrong. Like I should have my 8th SCV at this time. Like right, like it's just instant feedback that you know that you're wrong. Hearthstone's not like that for the most part, right? There's a lot of RNG involved. There's a lot of whatever, and we say like you have to be on yourself, but like even if you are losing or doing bad things and you're identifying it, that's winning because that's making you better, and that's why you're playing this game. You're not playing this game to win. You're playing this game to get better at winning, right? Unless you're like in a tournament or something, like winning is not the end goal. The end goal is improvement, and that will get you to win. So if you think about the game in that way, I think it cuts down a lot of the anxiety. Like people get anxiety in a lot of the games that people play competitively, but if you change your goal, right? I say this a lot to people who want to like climb Overwatch as well. Like I'm a bad mechanical player for pretty much every game, but I'm in like mid diamond, or I was in mid diamond. I topped out at mid diamond in Overwatch, and people were like, "How do you play? Like it's so stressful." And I'm just like, I don't play to climb. Like that's in the back of my mind, but it's more that like I'm trying to see what this game is, what this game gives me, where I can make good moves, and I'll make a bunch of mistakes, but I will try to like fix it next time, or I'll learn something. I'll be like, okay, I have to react faster here. And I'm drawing that example because, like, for Hearthstone, I have no anxiety playing because I'm mostly sure my moves are right. So that's, like, a totally different, like, thing that I don't think, like, or I hope not everyone can relate to. Because if you are relating to it and you're getting 3 wins per run or whatever, that's really bad because that means you think you're doing stuff right and you're not identifying your things. But if you have the anxiety, you're probably able to identify things you're doing wrong, and that's what's causing the anxiety. So just separate out the whole win-loss thing. Like, that doesn't matter. If you have enough gold to, like, be in the arena run, you've already drafted it, you know? You're going to get a pack at the end of the day. Like, even at the worst result, it's going to be okay. Just focus on learning. And if you feel like you've learned some things, that's good. If you feel like at the end that, like, RNG determined every game and there's nothing that you could do, that's bad. And that's just you not identifying, like, the things that you should be learning from. So, put everything back in your control. Right, and what's in your control is what you learn from it, not necessarily the result.
Right.
Like,
I think that's really important. Sorry. Did you have more to say?
Nope.
Okay. Good. All right. So
that was a very emphatic good. You have nothing more to say.
Excellent. Yes. Excellent. No. I think what you said at the end there, put everything in your control. Right. I think that's an aspect that is very comforting for some people. So I understand why people get anxious for a lot of things, right? Like you are going up against someone, and some people don't enjoy the fact that it's like, oh man, this is like win or lose type of situation, right? Which it purely is. Like one person has to win, one person has to lose.
Zero-sum game.
It is a zero-sum game, exactly. And people get nervous about that, and especially because in a game in which they don't feel as confident with, right? So I'll just say this, that when you have done something for many times, you just become very comfortable with it, and you stop being nervous about it, right? Like you don't get nervous when you walk anymore. I mean, maybe that's a bad example, but
wow, I thought I made bad analogies.
I know, but like you don't get nervous about a lot of things that you used to be nervous about, probably, right? Now that doesn't solve the problem of like, okay, well, am I just going to be nervous for like the first 1,000 times to do it, and then I won't get nervous? It's like, no, you do want to try to sort of put it within context, right? And sort of identify like the control you have over the situation.
Yep.
So for example, okay, I'm going to try another analogy here.
God.
Bear with me. So it's like asking someone out, right? I remember like back in, like middle school or high school or whatever, like that used to be a huge deal, right? Like telling someone about your feelings and asking them out was like the biggest thing in the world. And, you admittedly were very anxious about it. Now, one way that you could like try to sort of control that situation is to just establish like, look, it doesn't really matter. Like what I am thinking at that point is, like because I'm nervous, I'm elevating this to an importance that doesn't really exist. If the other person says no, or if I lose this Hearthstone game, like what is going to be the difference in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, sure, I take a loss, I lose a little bit of gold, or it does
But
feel
I'm
bad.
playing the game. It should
Yeah,
be
I'm
like
playing the game
at least a
exactly.
little fun.
And like as you sort of progress, as you improve, whether it is in life slash confidence or Hearthstone and getting more wins in the arena, you know that you're improving, and you know that in the grand scheme of things, this one small loss or one small victory, it just adds to your total overall experience, right? And the most important thing is that it is a very small aspect of your Hearthstone career and also of your life, whether or not this person says yes or no to you going to see the movies and grabbing coffee or something. Anyways, that's my analogy. I thought it
And
was
so that's
much.
Merps's idea of the perfect date: coffee and movie.
Actually, please, if you're out there, do not go to a movie on the first date. That is a terrible
I
idea.
was about to
What you
say I
want
didn't
to
want to
do.
comment on it.
Oh, no. I mean, because that's a stereotypical thing, right? No.
Okay,
But please, if you're out there, never go on a movie
dating
with
advice from Merps.
that's terrible, okay? That is absolutely terrible. You want to be able to have a conversation. Also, don't
Oh,
make it
more
overpriced on
anxiety.
the
You need to
first date.
talk to your date?
I
What
know
are
you
you
have to talk to
recommending?
them, and make sure it's a comfortable place. And like, just we could have another Lightforge on this. Probably not a
No,
Lightforge because
no,
it's
we
not
should
public
not have
for
a Lightforge
Lightforge.
on this.
No. Okay, we won't. I'll talk about it on stream sometime if you guys are interested. That's it for now. Okay, that's it.
Okay, okay, good analogy. All right, it's just like asking a girl out. That's gonna calm a lot of people out there's anxiety. I feel like that's got to be up there in terms of things people are actually anxious about in real life. Like it's like public speaking #1, asking a girl out #2. But okay, but yeah, it's the same idea, right? Like at some point, you just gotta put things in perspective, and you gotta figure out what you can control and what you can't. Okay, let's end this on the Hunter, which we're going to do a run with after this. And Hunter is, in a very good place. I think it's one of the better classes these days. Good matchup against Mage. We talked a lot about it last week. I don't really know what else to add about the Hunter, but if you're like it's a very divisive class, right? Like you're either a fan of the Hunter or you're not. I don't think people are like Hunter's okay in terms of how much you like it. So if you like the aggressive game, you like Hunter. If you don't like the aggressive game, you don't like Hunter. And the hero power spells it out for you. And it kind of, like right now, aggression is kind of the way to go for any class that is not like priest or mage. Like, you have like shaman also, sort of. So maybe priest, mage, shaman are classes that can possibly go control. Rogue can control in the early game, but then they have to flip the switch pretty early. They can't play the long control game, and everyone else kind of has to go fast because of Firelands Portal. And Hunter is very excellently positioned in it. So that's all like I want to say about this. I don't want to get into like specific cards or anything. You could if you want, but just know that this is a good meta for the Hunter. In fact, there hasn't been that many better metas for the Hunter than this one, I think.
Yeah. Hunter is definitely a very hard class to play. So it's definitely not the strongest class, and it's also a very hard class just because you have to plan around the hero power, right? You have to plan around the hero power, and you have to plan around sort of like every move that you make in the early game is magnified because you're probably not going to have the value that these other classes have. So you really have to, every single decision is extremely important, but it's really satisfying to just like beat down your opponent and have them
Yes.
just, yeah. They're especially like,
They cry mercy, but you show them no mercy.
you show them no mercy, man. And it's also just great because Rexar has just this blank expression on his face, and you're getting beat down by this guy, right? It's perfect. And this is why
It's
I will
so
never
true.
buy the
He has no
Blue Edition.
pupils.
No, he has no pupils. But anyways, that we won't go on too much with the Hunter. You guys sort of know like how to play it. We've gone through it many times, so that's all I'll say about it.
And just in case it wasn't blatantly obvious, this is what you should do with a hunter. Rexstar is even like half ogre. Like, Blizzard spells it out for you, and they've designed this class pretty well for what it does. And I think it's a testament to the arena that hunter works. Because it's very, like, it's actually kind of amazing to me that hunter works. I feel like hunter should either be unplayable or be the most powerful class in a totally randomized fashion, or like a 95% randomized fashion like the arena. But Hearthstone is, as a fundamental game, is designed well enough that hunter is pretty balanced and very fun to play, and offers a very unique take on the arena. Definitely give it a try, like give it a run or two, see if you like it if you've never really touched hunter before. But it is a very divisive class, and if you just end up saying like I don't like hunter, or like I only want to play hunter, that's totally understandable. It's also very frustrating to play against if you have certain decks, because usually hunters beat the good decks. Like, that's what's great about hunter. Like, you will take a hunter deck into like a mage matchup, and the mage is like, oh, I got this, look at all my good cards, and you're like, well, you're dead. So,
yep.
Good luck. Good luck with the rest of your run, but you're not taking this one from me. All right, so that's it for the Lightforge. We'll see you guys next week, so until next time, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Bye.